it's a nice little segue to the safety class, right? Let's talk about the safety class, Ryan. Notre Dame signed what will now be a 3-man safety class still. They have a Don Schuler, who was obviously an early commit. They got Ben Minich this summer. And then Brandon Hillman will be a guy that we've talked about we like as a safety, potentially sort of like a 3 safety look where maybe he's the rover and Don Schuler's the alley guy and Ben Minich plays over the top. Maybe a Don can play over the top at times, although I don't love him as much there. And then Ben Minich can be sort of an alley guy. Jeremiah, and I think you could see a look where maybe a Don Schuler is sort of the rover, or Jeremiah Hillman, or it's Jeremiah Hillman. Because Jeremiah, he just reminds me so much of Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah that I keep calling him Jeremiah. Where Brandon Hillman is sort of that alley player too. I like the idea of having Hillman as sort of like a true 4-2-5 safety. And when I mean true 4-2-5, where it's literally 5 DBs, not the linebacker thing that they have now. Because let's be honest, the best rover that Notre Dame has had since they went to the 4-2-5 was a guy that was barely over 205 pounds. The lightest rover they've had was by far the best rover they had. With all due respect to Drew Tranquil, was very good in 2017. He was a much better inside linebacker than he was a rover, in my opinion. Yep. Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoah is by far their best, and they struggled to keep him at 210 pounds. And so for me, I look at it and say, I would love to see, when you look at the schedule down the road, being able to go to a group of a 4-2-5 that is a true safety option is the way to go. And I think this safety class helps them get there. It was impossible to meet all the numbers needs in this class, Ryan, because honestly, from a pure numbers need, you might have argued for 4, but you just can't bring in 4 safeties in one class and expect to keep them all. You had to try to go 3 and then maybe get another 2 or 3 man class next year, or we'll talk about cornerback, maybe corners where you can find a way to move somebody. But to me, numbers wise, they met their need. I do. I think they needed to add a little bit of size and playmaking ability to the back end. I think they did that. Because I'll say this, one of the biggest issues in the safety position the last 2 years, it's not coverage. I'm actually pretty decent in coverage. They can't tackle. And I'm serious. I'm not trying to be sarcastic. It's a very bad tackling group. This group is made up of guys that can flat out tackle.
Hit. Yeah. Yep.
Not just hit. You're right. They can hit, but these are good tacklers, especially Peyton. Good God. Especially Don Schuler and Ben Minich. They're very good tacklers. Like I said this to Don yesterday. Don was always a really fundamentally sound tackler. Then his body blew up a little bit and became a punishing tackler. Yes. But the fundamentals were always there. The technique was always there. And so that's the thing that you kind of like.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing how the defense evolves, Brian, because I think of it towards how Gary Patterson's TCU was in the early years, right? When because he was the guy that really kind of revolutionized the 4-2-5. And like you said, it was more of a 3 safety look. Like they played a lot of umbrella coverage, and that was a little bit different, right? Like both safeties could kind of rotate down, and you could still play too high because you had both guys that could be that alley player and be that type of dude that could play short zone. And you have that. I mean, you do. And I think the big key to this class for the safety group to be a good group moving forward is the fact that I thought Ben Minich had incredible growth as a senior and makes you feel a lot better about his potential to maybe be a deep safety in this system and to be that guy that can play over top, can play single high at points, because you know that a Don Schuler is going to come ready to go and he is going to throw his body around. He's going to be super physical. He's going to get what he can get out of his talent, man, because he's a talented kid and he's a ferocious competitor. So having him combined with a Brandon Hillman, that could be a little bit of kind of like an interchangeable type of thing, maybe between that rover strong safety spot. Because, hey, man, I haven't seen enough of Brandon Hillman from a coverage perspective because he was asked to do so much at Churchland. But what I know about Brandon Hillman defensively is my guy's a striker. Like, he is going to come up with some bad intention. He is going to lay wood on dudes. Like, that is what he is going to do. He is ferocious, 6'1", 190-plus pounds, physically imposing dude like Adon is. And then Ben Minich, to your point, Brian, when he's asked to run the alley and to work inside out, it's a very solid wrap-up tackler. He can do this stuff in the run game, but he becomes a key point to this class as far as how it fits together because Ben Minich has the best traits to work over top, to be that true free safety type. And now you need him to be that kind of guy, the guy that we saw as a senior, but you need him to keep getting better, keep working on it, keep getting to a higher level. Because if he can, the safety class is good, man. Like it's going to be good.
Yeah.
It's just it has more question marks now because you don't have that top level true free safety type. You need
and that's why I gave it a B. And we didn't say this at the beginning. I gave the class a B because here's the thing. I want everybody to stop and think about this for a second. Okay, a B is outstanding, top 15. If you can talk about what they could have had, what they should have had, and all that kind of stuff, and that's all fair. That's all fair conversations to have. It's not for this show, but it's all fair conversations to have. But let me ask you this. Can you go around the country and look through all the different recruiting classes and tell me 15 groups that are better than this one? There are those that are better. Oh, Bama did this. And not arguing that. But can you point to 15 groups or 20 groups that are better than this one?
Right.
You can do that, and I would encourage you to do that if you don't believe me. But what I would say is, or you could trust me, and look, we're giving it a fair grade. It's a B because they met their numbers need. They have guys that can come in and play early, and they have enough. It's not as versatile as I would have liked, and that's the one thing where if you want to talk about what you lost when Peyton Bowen jumped out, he was a guy that could be a true free safety type. Yeah. They don't really have that, although Ben Minich showed me more of that as a senior than he had as a junior. So those are the reasons I drop it down to a B. But you have 4 kids that at least one recruiting service ranks as a top 250 player, right? I mean, that matters, right?
And
that matters to me.
I would add in too, Brian, that Brandon Hillman's been a guy that I think has been underranked because he's been asked to play so many different positions. Like if he was just a safety his entire career, I don't know where he'd be ranked. I'm not really sure, if I'm being honest. Like maybe he's a top 150 kid. Maybe he's higher. I don't know. But I look forward to seeing that type of player on campus because when he settles in on one position and he focuses in on that day-to-day and the eye discipline and the schematics of playing and the approach, consistency, I look forward to seeing that type of player because maybe he can be that high upside type of player at the position because you just don't know because he was just asked to do so many different things in high school.
Yeah. To your point, right? The physical tools are there.
Yes.
The physical tools are there.
No doubt.
And I've heard people say, well, he's timed it. He ran a 4.7 electronic, but it was a while ago. He also ran a 4.2 shuttle. 4.7 is faster than Jalen Elliott. He's in the same speed range as Jalen and Alohi to me. Which, again, there was not that long ago. They were one of the 5 to 6 best safety tandems in the country, right?
Alohi Gilman's starting games in the NFL right now.
Yes.
So,
yes. So, to me, was it an elite group? No. It was a good group.
Really good group, yep.
But here, Adon Schuler's another one. How did Adon Schuler go from the 198th player in the country, according to Rivals, in February to – by June, completely out of the top 250. Okay, fine. It's a 52-person drop, whatever. To now he's a 3-star. That impacts their rank. Like when you take a kid who literally less than a year ago you had as a top 200 player, goes out and he won like Player of the Year awards.
Yes,
in New Jersey, right?
State Player of the Year on defense. He had 103 tackles, 3 interceptions, and was also a key piece on offense when he needed to be, and a punt returner as well. So,
and you have him you dropped him. Now, if you always here's the thing about On 3. In their defense, they've never been high on Micah Bell.
Sure.
It's not like you could say they dropped him from a top 200 to 3-star because you can. I think they're wrong, but it's just that's how they view it. They've always viewed him that way. They've always been that. There's no bias there, at least that I know of. At least towards Notre Dame bias. How you take Adon Schuler and have him as your top 200 player in February, and by December, you have him out of the top 300, out of the top, not only the top 250, but not even as a 4-star. They have 400 some 4-stars, Ryan. It's absurd to me. And again, it's Preston Zinter, Adon Schuler, guys that several months ago they had as top 250 players that they have dropped to 3 stars after outstanding senior seasons. Makes no sense to me. Now you could say, hey, look, out of the top 250, fine. Other players emerged and got better. Totally cool with that. But why are they now 3 stars?
Mm-hmm.
That's the part that's and the reason is it doesn't matter to me. It's not going to affect their careers. It impacts you all and how you view these things and the perception that some of you guys have. Well, they didn't reach these goals and this, that, and the other thing. Okay. So this is a good safety group. I will say this, my knock on it, and the reason I have, Chris O'Leary is one of those guys, to me, he's got to show me something in 2024. Because I don't blame him for Peyton Bowen, but here's the deal. You striking out in 22 is why you needed a guy like Peyton Bowen so bad. And so you got a good safety group. You better follow up at the very least with a similar group next year, Ryan. Yes. And that's going to be an important thing for Coach O'Leary, who's done a good job with development, in my opinion, so far. Like the coaching part he's done well with so far. It's the recruiting part that's a question mark for me.
Which is weird because you hear about his great personality and everything, right? Like recruits consistently say that, but I mean, it's definitely something to monitor. There's no doubt. And again, it's like one of those things, again, Brian, that we've talked about with a couple of positions. It's just you lessen the margin for error, right? Like that's the point blank period to it, right? Like I still think that I think a Don Schuler could be a really good player at Notre Dame, really good, impactful player. I think Brandon Hillman could be a really impactful player. I think Ben Minich could be an impactful player. But now you need to count on all 3 of those guys to be impactful, right? And we know that the margin for error is getting smaller at that spot. That's just where we are. And safety is quietly a position that there's going to be guys that can fight for meaningful playing time. Like I still think a Don Schuler and those guys can still fight for meaningful playing time, especially early. But you don't have that guy that is like a seamless transition into being the dude early on, So that's just what we're missing, in my opinion.
The other part too is in defense of Coach O'Leary and the staff, they're being on Ben Minich early because one of the questions that Sean asked last night when I was on the Lucky Lefty podcast, Sean asked me, he said, "What would you say is the best evaluation?" And he thought I was going to say Boubacar because I think Boubacar has such a high ceiling. I said, but no, you look at Boubacar and everybody sees that. His tools are obvious. Some schools just didn't feel like the tools were worth the projection. You know what I mean? But the tools are certainly there. The reason I went with Ben Minich on defense is because I didn't see that one. Like they got it right. I didn't see it at first. I've said on the show, I said, look, I've been asked to give this kid a shot to go out and play his senior year and all this and to just give him a benefit of the doubt. And I said, I'll do that, right? I'll give the kid a fair shake. I didn't see it. I saw a 3.5-star kid, 3-star kid that was a good depth player. One thing we said, this kid's going to be a great special teams player. Yes. I just see a guy that could be a safety, a guy that could be an impact player at Notre Dame. And then he went out and played a senior year, and I was like, I was wrong. Like, that's one I missed because they saw something. Now, in my defense, it was a camp that I wasn't at that was the final straw for them. So I didn't have that data, which is why I was willing to give them the benefit of the doubt, is how well he looked at that camp. And then he came out in his senior year, and that jump in athleticism that he went from junior to senior year was a big thing for me because the one thing you and I said at the time when they got him right, because we both had some skepticism, like, we'll see how it plays out, but I just don't see it yet. He was a heck of a high school football player. I didn't see the Notre Dame level of athleticism. Right. I thought he was in Indiana, an Iowa, a Northwestern, a Minnesota, which is a good football player, but just not. Is that guy going to help you win a championship? Right. No. When we say he's an Indiana level player, it's not an insult to Indiana. Right. It's good football players. It's Division I football player. It's just not that Notre Dame going to help you win a championship kind of guy. As a senior, he was that dude.
Yes.
Right. And I've told the story before, but I have a friend of mine who covers Ohio State and was doing play-by-play at a playoff game, and I think it was St. X, and he calls me afterwards. He's like, the best player in the field that day was Ben Minich. Now, keep in mind, they have Malik Hartford, who's a top 100 recruit on that roster.
Who's the dude? Who's
committed to Ohio State? My buddy's an Ohio State guy, and I said, did Malik did Malik not play? He goes, no, he played. He goes, it's just Ben was the best player on the field today, and it wasn't close.
Nice.
Right? And so – I said, okay, that's great. And then you start watching the film, you're like, okay, they got this one right. Now he's got to translate it to Notre Dame. But that if Ben Minich was what we thought he was when he first signed, my view of this class is a lot different. So I think that signature was big for getting that evaluation right for them, one that I questioned at the beginning, is what saved this class. And then the other thing that saved this class too was Chad Bowden just – even though here's the thing I love about Chad. The class was set, but I think in the back of his mind, Chad had enough concerns about all the trips that Peyton Bowen was taking that he's like, I'm just going to make sure that we still have some dudes. And so that's what Khalil Barnes was. The problem there with Khalil Barnes was he wants to play offense, and Notre Dame really wasn't willing to give him that opportunity when it all was said and done.
Right.
But then he goes out and he finds this cat from Virginia named Brandon Hillman. And he says, we're going to take this kid. Why? Because this kid's a football player. Where's he going to play? We'll figure it out. But this is why you take a Brandon Hillman, because if Peyton Bowen leaves, you're good.
Mm-hmm.
If you need a rover, you're good. If you miss a receiver, you're good. Like, let's say Dylan Edwards decommits and they don't get Caleb Smith. Let's say Caleb Smith would have just decided to stay at Texas Tech. You're good because you can move this kid there. If let's say you needed a second running back, you had to have a second running back. You're good. You can move him there. And let's just say hypothetically, you get in a situation where your quarterback, you have a bunch of injuries at quarterback. Say, we need a kid who can get us out of a game. You're good.
Yeah.
So those kind of guys are really rare.
Mm-hmm.
And this is exactly why they recruited him. So props to Chad Bowden for getting this one done. Because and that's the other thing where we got to say about Chris O'Leary is he didn't recruit this kid. Chad Bowden did.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I have to say, like, now Chris O'Leary, as Don said with this yesterday, did a great job with the Don Schuler. Great job.
Yep.
The tools are there. He just has to, he's young, right? And that's the thing. I'm not killing him. Like I'm probably harder on Al Washington than I am on Chris O'Leary in that same grade, because Chris O'Leary is like 27, 28 years old. Al Washington's been doing this a lot longer. My expectation for him is higher.
And he has a reputation to begin with. Right.
So I need to see Coach O'Leary do on the recruiting trail what he is doing with his team, which is I think he's a pretty good developer of talent so far, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Now he just needs to be able to recruit, give himself a better talent pool to work with. This is a good first step, though. I will say that. It's a good first step.
Mm-hmm.
It's more so the concern comes from this good class, but striking out last year is really what comes from for me.
Right.
Because I never liked Jaden Bellamy. Not liked, that's a harsh word. I never viewed Jaden Bellamy I think Jaden Bellamy is transferring to the level he was supposed to be at. He's transferring to Syracuse. That's the kind of player I think he is. Good, solid player. More of that level of Power 5 guy, not a Notre Dame guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you're left with zero safeties. And that's what drags the grade down a little bit.